neighborhood beautification. That's very important to Detroit. It's very important to block clubs, organizations, and people who live in the community. We got started with 2 lots and a vision of a treehouse center. Because if we can take these blighted lots, Detroit give us grants to be able to do something with them that the community wants, it's a plus because we're bringing our neighborhoods back to where we want them to be, where they should be. All because I live in Detroit.
All right, I'd like to welcome you to this edition of In the Conference Room with Mark S. Lee. And hey, we're at the end of August. We have some hot days. Early happy Labor Day to all of you. Hey, summer's not over. We have plenty of summer left. But I want you to sit back and relax and enjoy the conversation. As you know, we have conversations with business leaders from across Detroit, state of Michigan, and beyond. Hey, and as far as Hawaii, I'll get you that in a second. I want you to sit back and enjoy the conversation. As you know, this is your source for information. My name is Mark S. Lee, and I'm your host for In the Conference Room. Thank you all for tuning in. And we do have a very special guest from Hawaii. You've all heard that phrase, say nice things about Detroit. I am so pleased to welcome to the conference room is Emily T. Gail. And yes, she is in Hawaii. Emily, thanks for joining me in the conference room, and aloha.
Aloha, Mark. I'm delighted. And while I'm in Hawaii, my heart has been in Detroit for the last 40 years that I've been in Hawaii. So
You've been in Hawaii for 40 years?
In 1985, 86, yeah.
All right.
Came at the lowest point of our life.
Let's talk about
my
that.
life. And I just,
Really?
to tell you can pull, yeah, absolutely. Lost our house, lost our lease on the store. McDonald's wanted our space.
Yeah.
We were fighting immigration to try to get a green card for Pooh, and very, very low part of our life. But fortunately, we had come to do the Ironman back in 1982 and got very involved with the Ironman because we were all new at putting on events. So we were consultants to the Ironman quite a bit. A lot of our touches from our Emily Detroit run are in the foundation of the Ironman triathlon here in Hawaii. So I was invited to come be an interim race director, and we did. And that interim turned into 35 years. But I had always planned on coming back, no doubt, to get my life back on track, Pooh and I. And time passes, and I bought a condo here, and I've been upside down for 15 years. So I wasn't in a position where I could move. It's been really hard to hang on to it. I'm glad I did, because now I can put it on the market and maybe put a little money in the bank, something I haven't had for a long, long time, and get back to Detroit. And, I feel like I've made a difference from Hawaii about Detroit. I always said, wherever you live, work, and play, you can be great ambassadors for your hometown. And mine was Detroit. And I think I've been a great ambassador for Detroit here in Hawaii.
No question about that. If you follow Emily on social media, she's always she has her say nice things about Detroit paraphernalia. She's always wearing something that says Detroit. You see her right now. Lean back a little bit. There it is. It says say nice things about Detroit. She has a T-shirt on right now. And let's start the conversation right there. Say nice things about Detroit. Let me start back even further. Were you born and raised in Detroit before I forget? Were you born and raised in Detroit?
No, I was born and raised on Grosse Ile. My father was born and raised, lived in Detroit. He lived actually on Kirby, in the house that is now the Center for Creative Studies. And he gave piano lessons there. He was a piano player. He played at Cliff Bell's, and then he started Gail and Rice, where he booked music and entertainment. But, in those days, people moved their families out to the suburbs, right? Or whatever was called the suburbs. We lived on Grosse Ile, but my dad drove into Detroit every single day, right along Jefferson, through Ecorse, River Rouge, through Delray. I envied him. But he had Gail and Rice. He also had an office supply store in the Penobscot building that we grew up working in. And so Detroit was in our hearts because that's who he was, and my mom too. But we grew up on, and it was just such a wonderful thing when we could go into Detroit with him and hang around the office supply store and hang around Gail and Rice, which was in the Marquette building, right on the lower level there in Washington Boulevard. So we were a big part of things in Detroit as kids because my father was such a big part of it. The auto shows, booking music for the Deb parties, everything. So it's been in my heart. And I'm looking right now. I'm looking up my stairs right now, and I've got books lined up. One of them is Detroit, the Engine of America, I think it's called. It was R.J. King's book. Well,
Oh yeah,
R.J. King is
RJ.
one who told me a few years back. Did you know a relative of yours was the mayor of Detroit at one time? And I've never really known a lot about my family. My middle name is Trowbridge. You know the Trowbridge house on
Oh
Jefferson?
my, yes, absolutely.
That's my family. But I was estranged from my family for many years, unfortunately,
Mm.
when we were fighting immigration. And that meant I didn't get a lot of the stories from my father and things. But now I'm getting teary because I so many people send me stories about the Trowbridge family. And I love learning more about my deep roots. You know, going into Elmwood Cemetery with my twin sister a few years ago, and the person there was so kind about showing us all the, the what do you want to call them, the tombstones and
Yeah,
the head things in the cemetery with
yeah.
my family's name on them. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I have always been a deep Detroiter, even though I grew up on Grosse Ile.
Well, Grosse Ile is part of Metro Detroit. Obviously, Detroit's a vast city. I mean, it's geographically it's large, it's huge, it's significant, no question about that. And so let's fast forward to say nice things about Detroit. How did that start? I mean, we all know the phraseology. It's a well-known phrase. Obviously, you coined it. What's the history behind say nice things about Detroit?
It actually started on a January day when we were in Florida. And of course, everybody goes to Florida, right? We're
Right?
walking along the street in Fort Lauderdale or somewhere, and we saw, would see people from Michigan because a lot of people knew us because we had the store, which was so popular. And they say, "Aren't you glad you're away from Detroit?" And we were like, "Wow, what is this about?" So we decided we needed to get people, and we would say to them, "Hey, no, you can love your city and love being in Florida too. Be more
Right.
proud of it." And so we came up with Say Nice Things About Detroit. I have since learned that it actually came from something here in Hawaii back in the 70s. How it was in our mind or something. But we decided we would fly an airplane over Easter weekend from Miami to Fort Lauderdale. And of course, in those days, it was pretty easy to do. It was like $400. You hire a
Okay.
plane. There was no, homeland security and things like that. And that plane flew up and down the beaches over Easter weekend that said, "Hi, Detroiters, enjoy Florida. Say nice things about Detroit. Emily." And then we
Wow.
got in touch with a friend of ours who was with AP, Associated Press. He was from Detroit. I wish I could remember his name right now. I just drawn a blank. And of course, he put it out on the wire service. And the best picture that was shown was the one on the Detroit News, a full page of it.
Yes.
And people responded to it in a way that, like, wow, we particularly longtime Detroiters, absolutely. We can be our best ambassadors. And we just parlayed that into talking about to people like, please come down in Detroit, experience your personal experiences, and you'll have something to say nice about Detroit. You don't have to make it up. Then, when the Republican convention or the Republican National Committee decided the Republican convention would be in Detroit in 1980, the Republicans were
1980.
horrified. They did not want to come. They wanted to go
Mm.
back to Kansas City. So we decided, we ended up we ended up hiring airplanes in every state capital in the country, and we traded off with them. And we had John McMurray from WJR kept tabs on the weather for us every day. And we wanted to fly this banner in every state capital to convince the Republicans that if you come to Detroit, you're going to get a warm welcome, reassuring downtown Detroit hug. So we arranged to fly those banners. We had trade outs with a lot of the pilots. We'll give you publicity. Some were 400. I think the whole thing at the time cost us $3,000-4,000 that we probably didn't have. But
Oh, yeah.
it was also, to be honest with you, at the time, the Detroit Convention Bureau wanted all of us who were members to donate another $500 to keep everybody have them party in Cobo Hall. And we were
Mm.
like, no, we don't want them partying in Cobo Hall. We want them out on the streets. Don't
Mm.
make them feel afraid. They're coming with that fear anyway. So
Right.
a little bit, it was our answer back to the Convention Bureau. I don't think I've ever told that story publicly.
There you
And
go.
it ended up going up in 39 cities. The day John McMurray called us and said, "Okay, the weather's pretty good." We gave everybody the okay, and it went up in 39 cities. I've got stories from like the Dallas Times Herald that says, "The Motor City Mouth. Who is she? What's about?" In Concord, New Hampshire, it was on the day of the primary, and we got the top part of the newspaper, and the primary got the lower part. It showed the banner, "Hi, Concord, say nice things about Detroit, Emily." And said,
My
"Okay, we don't
goodness.
know who Emily is, but stay tuned. More later." And the next day, they said, "She's from Detroit. She wants all the Republicans to go there with an open mind and get downtown and walk the streets and get a downtown reassuring downtown Detroit hug at Emily's, because we also used it as a promotion for Emily's. But it was a promotion to get people out in the street, not come with the fear that they had. Organic, off the wall at the time. And it was kind of the way we did things. And it's probably why we struggled so hard during our days with Emily's across the street, because we were really outliers, to be honest.
Well, so the phrase actually started in 1980. Is that what you're saying?
That was 1979. Easter weekend,
1979.
1979.
I
We
remember when
pulled
that
those
convention.
banners.
I remember when that convention came to Detroit. I believe that was the nomination for Ronald Reagan. I believe he was the
Yes.
nominee. Yes, it was. I remember all the activity
Yep.
downtown, and I
I
remember
have
you.
pictures.
So I was actually working downtown. I was in college. I was interning in downtown Detroit at the old Detroit Bank and Trust building, which is now the Comerica Tower. And that was
Sure.
211 West 4th Street. And I remember walking out of my, again, I was interning, so I was a college student. And I remember walking on this street. I remember going to your store. I also remember seeing all the visitors and TV cameras out there. And I also remember watching one of the reporters interviewing a visitor, to Detroit. I believe the crew was from Philadelphia, and said, well, here we are in the Motor City and blah, 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 blah. What are your impressions? This gets to right what you're saying. He said, what are your perceptions and your impressions of Detroit? So I looked at this interview from the street because I didn't know if I was going to see it in Detroit. Obviously, it was in Philadelphia. And the guy was like, hey, this is awesome. It's been a great experience. So it gets to exactly what you were just saying, giving people a chance to go out there and experience the city.
Have their own stories, and so often, people think of like, oh, you got to make something up. And I'm like, no, I'm not addressing the naysayers. I'm
Yes.
addressing the people who love our city, and we can do it. And what I like about it is it does feel organic to me every day. I mean, I wear my something with Detroit on it, and every day I run into somebody who says, "Oh, I got a cousin from there. Oh, I was there last summer. Oh, today I put this on this necklace today. Mary Kramer from Cranes, because I know you write your column in Cranes. Well, Mary and Bill Volz, her partner, were here last month, just a few weeks ago, and we had a wonderful time together. And she brought me this necklace from Rebel Nell.
Oh,
Actually, it was
yeah.
a keychain, and I put it on a necklace. And
That's
there's so
awesome.
many. Isn't that cool? I mean, there's so many organizations. The way I feel about why I want to be in Detroit is there's so many people that are new in Detroit that I admire what they're doing and I have an enthusiasm, but they don't know the past. There's too many
Yeah.
stories from the past that aren't linked in. There's too many people from the past that aren't linked in who never left. I mean, I'm going to put one that comes to my mind because it's where I reconnected with you 6-7 years ago, maybe even
Yeah.
longer.
Yeah.
Is Luther Keith with his
Absolutely.
Detroit Arise.
That's right.
His neighborhood days. I mean, Luther was a reporter. He's part of that old school like me. We're all part of an era. Marcia Music. I love what Jordan is doing. I'm just looking at my little list I made here. Highland Park. When I was my best friend from childhood, I'm stay with when I come to the first week, she would always talk about Highland Park because her grandparents lived in Highland Park and they went there. So Highland Park has always been on my radar. And I had the wonderful blessing to be able to take a tour of Highland Park with Angela Lugo Thomas, who's a very dear friend. Her grandmother was Kadesha Shelby.
Mm.
Remember Kadesha with Coleman Young's
Absolutely. Yes.
administration? So Kadesha would always come in the store, and then she would bring her little granddaughter in, who was like 3 years old at the time. So Angela reached out to me years ago. We've become good friends, but Mama Shu, what she's done at Avalon Village. There's so many people that are doing things that really connect old Detroit and all the things that were an era that we're all a part of that I think needs to be integrated more and more into those who are new, who are doing wonderful things. I love that they come to
Absolutely.
Detroit, but I love Marcia Music and her poem, The Kidnapped Children of Detroit. She has a line in there that says, talking about all the people coming to, do good things in Detroit. She says, they came to save Detroit, but Detroit saves them.
I
Isn't
love
that
it.
a
I
great
love
line?
it.
Yeah.
I love it. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Emily T. Gail. The T stands for Trowbridge, famous Trowbridge family here in Detroit. And we're talking about the history of the famed line, Say Nice Things About Detroit. She's giving you her perspective. So for those of you tuning in from around the country, when you come here, you see the T-shirts that she has on. That phrase is so well known here in Detroit. And what intrigued me about Emily, just as an FYI, on my radio show, the previous talk radio station, she would listen to all the radio hosts, and she was constantly calling in, and she would call us from Hawaii, and she knew she knew what was going on in Detroit, the city, better than some people who actually live here, and she was just as
Mark, I
knowledgeable
have to
about
say,
what was happening here from Hawaii.
I loved your show on 9:10 a.m. I put that in my notes to mention it. I miss 9:10 a.m. I don't think I missed a show for a couple of years. To me, it was the voice of, in many ways, the voice of Detroit. And we're somehow, there's all kinds of ways you've been creative to get your voice out the way you have, so many ways. But I did listen every day, and I learned every day. The listeners taught me so much. All of you as hosts taught me a lot. Didn't mean I agreed with everybody, but to hear the other voices of Detroit, and so many of them were the voices of, and I say the past affectionately, because
Right.
we all stand on the shoulders of somebody, right? For
Yes.
me, I was standing on the shoulders of what was it, Frank Angelo,
Oh,
Mark
yes.
Belter. I'm thinking of
Yes.
my father, what's his name that started Kresge, Stan Kresge's. I remember I gave my first major speech at a Detroit Rotary, and I had file cards in my hand, and Stan Kresge, said to me, "Put those file cards away. You don't need them. You know what
Don't
you
need
want to
them.
say." And so all those, Larry Doss,
Yeah.
Ron Scott, these are Jim Ingram, um,
Oh my
Roy
goodness.
Williams. Those are all people that were mentors of mine. Oh, I get, Damon Keith. I got a picture of Damon up there. That I can't say enough about
Oh
what
yes.
Damon did for us. I mean, I want to weave those stories. I think Marsha Music and Jamon Jordan and so many people, yourself, you're keeping those stories out. Luther Keith, I could go on and on.
Oh,
I
thank you.
like being a part of that tapestry of people that can
Well,
connect the past with the present from those who maybe weren't here, and we can educate them a little bit.
you can't move forward without forgetting, and you cannot forget about the past, and you have to continue moving forward. We cannot forget our history. And one of the things that intrigued me about this conversation, we have a few minutes remaining, is I want to segue because you recently announced, I was obviously in Cranes and other publications here, that you're going to be moving back to Detroit. You mentioned you've been in Hawaii for several years. We understand why. But and I know that Detroit Homecoming is upcoming. I think later this month, sometime in September. But while many people have moved to, let's say, Hawaii and other states, we're seeing certainly a movement of people coming back to the Metro Detroit area, back to Detroit. What is your decision? Why do you, Emily, Gail, want to make that move back to the Motor City?
Well, I wanted to make the move back ever since I landed here, because as I say, we landed here at the lowest point of our life. And I didn't really want, I wanted to be here, but I didn't want to be here under the circumstances we were. So I just love I don't know, the texture of Detroit, the
Mhm.
fabric of the people and the character and the stories. And, I've got those deep roots, my Trowbridge family, my father. I want to continue that legacy just in terms of sharing the stories. Now, moving back is, it's going to take me a while. I hope to be there by spring, but I don't look at it as a huge change, because I always felt I was making a difference. And I remember a reporter from Detroit told me that they actually approached Cranes about doing a story for me. And somebody said to them, "But she doesn't live in Detroit." Well, now Detroit Homecoming, I always say Detroit Homecoming has given credibility to all us expats. The things I used to say all the time that people would say, "How can you make a difference from another city?" is now what they're realizing. A lot of us can, and a lot of us do, and a lot of us will, and even more will. Now, Detroit Homecoming has gone through unbelievable. I think this is year 11.
Something like that,
Jim
yeah.
Hayes, Colleen Robar. Jim Hayes has been such a dear friend of mine. I actually met him through my cousin. My cousin called me one time. He lives out east, worked for Sports Illustrated. He said, next time you get to Detroit, you got to go meet my friend Jim Hayes. He's come up with an idea. He was the publisher of Fortune. He wants to give back to Detroit where he lived. He hired me when he lived in Detroit and hired me to work for Sports Illustrated. Please go meet him. I went over to Cranes on one of my trips. I met Jim Hayes. He's got uh, Mary Kramer in the room, and then they said, "We want you to meet someone." And we walked around the corner, and it was Colleen Robar, who was the producer of Detroit Homecoming. We met each other, and she pointed to the little window. She was there from China, where she was doing PR for General Motors, but she was back for a couple of weeks, and she had a
Sure.
"Say Nice Things About Detroit" sticker in her office. So, they have been
Ubiquitous.
absolutely wonderful to me, Detroit Homecoming. They've
Yeah.
given me an umbrella for everything I feel, think, and want to do. And, I'm still a working stiff. I still got to work. So I love the idea of trying to shape what I want to do. Earlier in our conversation, you said you enjoy everything you do, but I imagine that is because you've learned what you don't want to do. And
Yes.
that's where I am. I've learned what I don't want to do, and how do I integrate the parts of it that I do like and continue to make a difference. And I feel every single day I make a difference here in Hawaii and there. I put a celebrity event on here in Hawaii for the Hilton, and I had Lem Barney come. I had Lem Barney. I had Fred Hickman. Remember Fred used to be with
I remember Fred,
WDID?
Channel
Yeah, because
4, sportscaster.
Fred, you remember him, right? And then he ended up with ESPN, and he always told me stories about he arrived in Detroit the night before an Emily Detroit run. He was in the Pontchartrain Hotel. He was going to go over to interview the next day, and the run went by the hotel, and he said, I was hooked. I said, yes. So we
Awesome.
remained friends for a long time, even while he was with ESPN. And
Yeah.
so, there's so many stories like that just are in my heart. And I love the fact, that my father, I even love the fact that one of my relatives started AA in Detroit, in Michigan. And anybody that's in AA and knows the big book, he wrote chapter 4, which is on fear. So there's a whole lot of things in my life that tell me I need to be back in Detroit, and also medical reasons.
Yeah.
There's good medical situations there. I don't need them now, but I will.
Well, and as we wrap up, I want to ask you, you could break some news here. When you come back to Detroit in the spring, at least that's your plan to come back in the spring, any thought, any indication, any idea to reopen a store somewhere downtown?
That falls in the category of those things that been there, done that.
Okay. So the answer is
But I
no.
will tell you, you do such a wonderful job as a MC for Hatch. And, I did submit a Hatch program about, 10 years ago. Victoria Katinsky, who used to come into Emily's, encouraged me to, about 10 days before it was closing, I submitted one. And I submitted it as a whole bunch of little pop-ups around the town before people were doing a lot of pop-ups. And my whole thing was to open up 9 by 12 room stores that just had hot dogs, T-shirts, just the basics. Because my very first store back in the late 60s, early 70s was in the Penobscot building. It was a 9 by 12 room. That was the foundation from which I built on. Yeah. So, Mark, I always put when I'm going to talk to someone, don't talk so much at the top of my notes.
Well, we're up against the clock, so I'm going to give you 30 seconds to say whatever you want to say as we close. We have 30 seconds. What would you like to say before we wrap up, as we wrap up?
Well, I'd like to say to everybody, thank you for the years of support, the kinds of text messages and notes I get from people every single day, from young people that grew up, falling in love with Detroit because of Emily's across the street, to people who are in their 90s and sending notes, and also to say to you, I really appreciate your support over the years. I remember when we reconnected, you were doing a show, your show at 9:10 a.m. down in Capitol Park before it was booming.
That's right. Oh my goodness, you're right.
Right? Yes, and I was listening to you. And you and Luther said, come on down here. And I did. I drove down and I got on your show with you. And, things like that, the organicness, the authenticness of people weaving their relationships and reconnecting. And there's so much history. I heard Rochelle Riley, who does this arts and cultures, I think, with the city. And I've always liked Rochelle's columns when she wrote for the newspapers, but I heard her do a talk at Southwest Conference last year, and somebody asked her, why isn't Detroit a 24-hour entertainment center? And she said, well, we're working on it. In fact, there's an area called Greektown. I don't know why they call it Greektown. That to me is a perfect example of people that really care about the city, but they don't have enough history. Because I also found in my journals, I found a note where I talk about walking into Delmar's, which was a very Greek store that was at the corner there in Greektown, and talking to the owner, and those kind of notes. Ben Davis, I had a note I found in my journal of Ben Davis inviting me to come work for him. I think he was at Rackham, wasn't he? Do you remember Ben Davis?
That was good to me.
Well, it's that history is really important to me to weave it. Your father was at the bank. I knew your father.
Yeah. Yes.
I probably went to him for loans a couple times.
Probably.
We got him.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, we are up against the clock, but Emily, Gail, I want to thank you so much for checking in from Hawaii And we appreciate you so much. We know you love the city of Detroit. Detroit loves you back. We are so happy to hear that your plans are to come back in the spring. So we are so excited to see you back here in Detroit. Go out, make it a great day. We appreciate you so much, Emily. Thank you.
I appreciate you, Mark, and I look forward to doing some MC together sometime.
You got it. Thank you. And thank you all for tuning in to the conference room with Mark S. Lee this week. Go out, make it a great day, make it a great week. Enjoy your Labor Day. Nice weather through the Labor Day weekend. To all of you kids going back to school, be safe. Have a wonderful and safe educational journey this year. We will check you out next time. Small talk. I'm sorry, conference room with Mark S. Lee. Take care, everyone.
Aloha.
Because I live in Detroit, I was able to get tuition-free college through the Detroit Promise. I feel very fortunate working with the Detroit Promise. They were able to afford me so many opportunities. I'm currently studying media production and journalism at University of Michigan Dearborn. I'm looking to take my talents further into the production industry, short films. I love working with people here, and this is where I want to be. And that's why I'm Detroit for life.